You're listening to BBC Radio Scotland at 8:15. Another day, another shock to the system for Western nations, used to taking American security guarantees for granted. When EU leaders meet for an emergency security summit in Brussels later, it'll be in the knowledge that the United States has not just paused shipments of military aid to Ukraine, but the sharing of intelligence with a country that's relied on Washington to hold off Russia's military assault. Well, ahead of this meeting in Brussels, President Macron made a televised address from the Élysée Palace, outlining plans for a European solution.
Mais compte tenu de l'évolution des menaces, de cette accélération que je viens de décrire,
as soon as next week, we will gather in Paris the army chiefs who will take responsibility for this matter. And so, this is a plan for a solid, lasting, verifiable peace, which we have prepared with the Ukrainians and several European partners, and which I defended in the United States 2 weeks ago and across Europe. And I would like to believe that the United States will stay by our side. But we have to be ready if this isn't the case.
Well, let's speak to Jamie Smith-Maillet, who is a freelance journalist based in France. Hi, Jamie. Thanks for speaking to us.
Hi, good morning, Gary.
It feels as though the French president has moved on from the US because he's talking about being in a new era.
Yeah, in many ways, it was a very strongly worded speech last night, and that's certainly the sentiment here in France this morning as he was addressing the nation there. And in some ways, the speech was really to reassure the nation, is what he'd said, about the sort of situation of global instability, with two concerns majorly on the table. On the one hand there, as you're mentioning, sort of the shifting away of support from Washington, which he said can no longer necessarily be relied on. And also, yes, we are entering a new era. And he clearly pointed out Russia as the threat, and also saying that peace can no longer be guaranteed on the continent. In many ways, it was sort of preempting the talks that you mentioned there that will be taking place in Brussels later on today between the 27 heads of state across Europe. But there is a shift in the sort of message coming forward that we've gradually been seeing in the last few weeks, and that's also been signalled as well with the meetings, the sort of hastily pulled together meetings in Paris a couple of weeks ago, obviously the summit in London just recently as well, and both Macron and Starmer making the trip across to the States. So things have been moving at such a pace, and we can gradually see the push here for Europe in many ways fending for itself, and that's one of the strong messages coming out of the speech last night.
Yeah, because there is a growing feeling that the US and its NATO membership can no longer be relied upon as well. He suggested that Europe's future security might involve extending the nuclear deterrent to other European neighbours. The UK and France currently have nuclear weapons. Did he give more detail on that?
At the moment, he's playing that very carefully in some ways. So he has said, and this is something that was mentioned in the press just a week or so ago, is that Macron would possibly look into this. He said for the time being that the nuclear deterrent is one option that could be put on the table alongside a whole host of others. Why he's playing it carefully in some ways is because it's a very heated topic internally, domestically in France. And that's because not everyone supports this as an idea for Europe. The position on the right and the far right is that these are French defence systems for France and for France alone. Marine Le Pen of the far right National Rally made that clear just last week as well. And then on the left, there's not necessarily support overall for nuclear deterrence. So it will be something that's discussed in coming weeks, but the details are yet to be followed through. And as I said, he's playing that card very carefully for the time being.
So this security summit in Brussels today, and he mentioned there in that little clip that we played a meeting that he's going to hold of army chiefs as well. What's the significance of that?
Well, the question really, obviously, we've got the strategic level at Brussels where we're looking at, supporting wider defence funding across the board, looking at measures as well of loosening the budget deficit measures for allowing member states as well to increase their defence spending. But ultimately, that's the big question, is it depends on the member states themselves to actually bolster and boost defence spending. So the questions here that we're sort sort of mentioned yesterday in France in his speech were looking into how France can invest further in military spending, the question obviously of also supplying further tools and equipment for the French army and basically increasing the military budget in France. But to do that, there will be questions around, well, where's that money going to come from? And that's the big question on the table at the moment as well. Obviously, France's deficit is still something that is being discussed. France's political situation is still very much in a period of instability. So these will be sort of the larger questions that will come forward if he's looking into increasing defence spending, which he clearly wants to do, but how he will go about doing that is the next question.
Jamie, thank you very much for that. Jamie Smith-Maillet, who is a freelance journalist in France.
21 minutes